First, every voice matters. Secondly, it's also about enhancing decision making. Thirdly, language accessibility. And finally, it's also about customer-centric approach.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining. My name is Wesley Sutliff. I'm a product manager here at Televic. Really excited for today's topic. It is, as you can see from the title slide, we're going to be talking about hands-free, which is a feature of our smart audio and control exclusively from Televic, but now available on the Televic G4 wireless family of products. So always on, always in control. First couple of house cleaning items. Just so you know, this is roughly about 40 minutes, depending on how quickly I speak. Do stay alert. I'll be throwing in some poll questions. Do participate, as we will be giving out a gift card to one of you. This webinar and all of the other previous ones, you can find them at televic.com/conference. Just go to support and then click on webinars. You'll see the whole archive there. Okay, let's jump right in. If you don't know Televic, a quick recap. Really, the scenes you're seeing on the screen now, the large institutions, the formal meetings, this is what people think of us. They think of these big, giant rooms, the request to speaks, all these specific features. But since smart audio and control, we've moved into the informal spaces, and particularly with the hybrid meetings. These spaces in particular required very particular audio routing. If you haven't heard me talk about this before, please go back and see my colleagues, because whether it's formal or informal, we're still very much focused on creating better understanding. So even though today I'm going to be focused on just a particular product line, the G4 wireless, and a specific feature set, which is the smart audio and control hands-free, do know that across the board, we remain faithful to our vision of creating better understanding. Okay, so wireless. Let's start with some of those challenges. Why is wireless so nerve-wracking? Well, we know due to the instability, disruptions, they can arrive gradually. And I'm not really talking so much about wireless instability in terms of your signal strength or interference amongst that. I'm talking about just trying to get the people, the meeting participants engaged using the technology. So that could come from a number of different things, and I'm going to go over some of them, but they kind of build until all of a sudden it becomes a full-on meeting disruption, a catastrophic failure. And this is really what we're trying to avoid with hands-free. You know, these missed words from a voice activation technology, you know, it can cause clipping. It might miss the few syllables. Or if you're not using some kind of hands-free or voice activation, you're using the push-to-talk or something, you might get muted microphones. And if you're in a courtroom, this could all lead to incomplete records. So why is it so nerve-wracking? Well, I mean, those challenges alone, but then as you take just one space and as you grow that, you try to scale, well, then just as it gets bigger and bigger, so do the risks. And we want to be able to address all this. We want something that within one space can give you the confidence, the same confidence you'd have from a wired system. But then even as you scale, that confidence scales with the number of rooms, with the number of users. So this is what we're going to cover today. We want to look at how Televic G4 wireless with hands-free, but then also our other operating modes as well. Hands-free, I think, is probably the most exciting, the most used, the most sought after, but it isn't the only one. How we solve these challenges with this technology. Talking about hands-free, we're going to cover a couple of use cases today: event spaces, divisible conference spaces, and historic courtrooms. By the way, historic courtrooms really could be council chambers, classrooms, really anywhere where the beauty of the architecture or the legal classification of the space prevents you from drilling or coring or doing anything to run cables. But I think courtrooms are probably the most prevalent. So how does this same foundation support all these different use cases? We're going to cover that. And then we'll wrap up, hopefully, where we're at the point where we feel that wireless can become your infrastructure and not a compromise. What do I mean by compromise? Well, throughout my career, it's always been that, you want to go wired, but if you can't, you have to make some kind of compromise and go wireless. We hope that by adding hands-free to our already robust and stable wireless solution, that you're not thinking of it as a compromise anymore. You're thinking of it as advantageous. It's now actually a benefit to be wireless, and that wired would be your compromise. Anyway, let's see if we get there. First up, here's our full poll question. Check down in the lower right of your screen. You should see a section for polls, and any second now you should see that poll question pop up. Put your submittals there. You can put them in the chat, but please do respond to the poll because then we'll know you're participating and get a chance to win that gift card. Okay, in your experience, what is usually the first sign that a wireless system is heading towards trouble? So you've got your options there. Go ahead and put in your response. I see some people are doing that. Thank you. Just for the sake of time, I will move on. This poll will remain open though. So if you can't get to it now, come back to it. Please do participate. We love to know what you think. Okay, so from a voice activation or push to talk, these are, if you think about those first couple of slides where it was showing, those big rooms, the push to talk, the request to speak, this is what people think of when they hear conference and interpretation systems or discussion systems even for just audio. And then, I don't know, some time ago, several decades ago, they kind of introduced this voice activation mode, which if you don't know, it tries to solve that problem of that first challenge, forgetting or refusing to push a button. This is my whole career. I've heard that. Yeah, my users, my participants, they're not going to push a button. They're just going to talk. And so some technologies try to solve that with voice activation. It's just a threshold, right? There's a measurement of the loudness of your voice. And if you're loud enough, like me, then you get to open that gate, your signal goes through, it finds a channel to transmit on, and then people can hear you. But because of that process, the voice activation, it introduces a delay because it takes time to go through that, and you might miss a few syllables. So I might start with a nice loud voice, but you missed, maybe the first word or even a couple of syllables of what I said before it clicks in and you start to hear me. The uncertainty comes from, did I speak loud enough? So if my threshold setting is, here, and then I start to speak a little bit below, maybe I don't open up that gate. So I might miss several words. Or if a soft-spoken person is trying to use this, maybe they don't activate the mic at all. Then the last part about voice activation that's so troubling is people don't always speak at the same volume for the entire time that they're speaking. You might start off really excited and be like, oh yeah, no, I completely agree. But then I might lose steam. And if I go on for a really long time, I run out of energy and my voice drops below the threshold again. And then the mic might mute again because it thinks you're done talking, even if you're not. So that's really the past. Well, it was for Televic. We abandoned voice activation because of all those challenges. It just didn't give you the certainty and the performance that you needed within these critical spaces. It was a disservice to do that because misspeech, it erodes trust. And that's how we felt. So voice activation, it's not good enough. Push to talk, if they're not going to push the button, we've all seen it now, Teams or Zoom or WebEx, it's, hey, you're muted, unmute your mic. So people forget, and these things cause disruptions. So what is our approach? It's hands-free. If you haven't seen our webinars specifically about hands-free, I do encourage you to go watch them. They're going to give you a lot more detail than I'll give you today. I'm going to talk high level because I really want to dive into how we're using hands-free within specific use cases. But the quick of it is that it's always on. The microphones are always on. It's not voice activation where they're muted and then they become activated. All the microphones are on, and we're using an automatic gain management system to lower or increase your microphone signal based on how you're speaking. So if you're speaking quietly, it makes you louder. If you're not speaking at all, almost all the way down to mute. So that way you get a really natural conversation, even as the inflection of your own voice changes throughout a meeting. It's very powerful. So how does that work? I'll do a quick little infographic here. Here we are in a courtroom. In this case, there are 3 microphones detecting signal. You have the judge who's speaking now, in this case, at the loudest. So what that looks like is you've got basically all the 3 microphone signals going through, and on the right-hand side of that chart, you see what's the overall output going to everybody's little loudspeaker. So when the judge is speaking, finishes speaking, then you see that those 1 and 3 where they're not talking, those drop all the way down. 2 is talking a little bit, it's coming up, but then as soon as they really start speaking loudly, or not loudly, but when they start speaking, then that goes up even further. The other 2 drop down. But throughout the whole experience, that bar on the right, that gray one, you see that never changed. It's auto mixing all the different signals so that you get signal, not noise. Anyway, there's lots of great webinars that go into great detail about this, but when you bring hands-free to the system, you get that confidence without the training. You're not going in there and having to put labels on the button, like push this button to activate your microphone. It's already on. You can walk into the room, walk into the space, sit down, start having your meeting. There's no operator intervention needed. Again, you go to those big, formal meetings, there's an operator, they're unmuting people's buttons on a request mode sometimes. You don't need that. It's just ready to go. And then the speech is captured the moment it happens. That's really the critical element of all of this, particularly when we get down to courtrooms, is you're not missing any speech. There's no cause for mistrial because the record doesn't have the transcription of what was said. It's always there. That's what this does. And we've been doing this now for some time. Hands-free is not new for Televic. What's new is that we're bringing this to the wireless platform as well, so we can get into some of these other spaces. All right, so let's jump in. Event spaces. What's the challenge here? Well, just by the nature of being a reconfigurable room, the furniture is not fixed, the microphones are not fixed, so you've got, typically, if it's a popular space, you're getting the most out of it, you're going to have fast setup and teardowns. I know, being part of events early on in my career, rooms like this might change several times a day. And you've got to be able to, move the furniture around, move all the settings around, the place settings, the waters, the cups, the glasses, and of course, the audio gear. I started off my career wearing a black suit and taping down cables throughout all these event spaces. It was terrible. I love what I do now because I don't have to do that. And now we want to be able to give the same confidence that we would with a wired system, but to the wireless. So we do that with a Televic G4 system because of what we can do with frequency hopping between 2.4 and 5, all the different things we can have in terms of the loudspeaker, the stem, the battery life for the long days. But with the hands-free, now you start getting into these other areas where there might be no limited or no operator oversight. Maybe you have an operator, but they're running the cameras and the presentation materials. They're not watching whose mic is muted or unmuted. Hands-free takes care of that. But what does it mean to you? If you have a high turnover event environment, here comes my second poll. What creates the most stress for your team? Let me know. I just threw a few out there, but tell me, is it the changeovers? Is it the battery life? Is it that RF coordination, or is it preventing the user error? Like, hey, your mic is muted. We can't hear you. Particularly difficult when it's a hybrid environment. So go ahead. That next poll is up. Please put in your answers. I see some of you have. Thank you. Okay, this will remain. You can come back to it if you like. I'm going to keep moving forward. Okay, event spaces. We talked about the challenges. Now with our approach with hands-free and the G4 wireless, so kind of mixing this together. Because it's the wireless, you get that fast pairing and the predictable behavior. Our devices will pair with an access point for the space. So there's a programming that happens at the time of installation, and you can simply put it into this pairing mode. The devices power on, they see the access point, they pair with it. Now they're a part of that system. It takes seconds. Now when it's hands-free, now we're able to have that mix minus that I talked about earlier, all the benefits of having the always on microphone. And you just simply set that in front of the person. They sit down, they start talking. So whether you're using that at a small scale or you want to scale that up, we can do that in kind of groups of 8. I have a little graphic to show you here in a second. But it can scale. And we just use access points per pairs of groups. And we use Dante to be able to handle all of the routes of the different microphones. Now I put in here flexible scaling using stacked access points that I was just talking about. But as excited as I am about hands-free, you don't have to use hands-free. So if you're in an environment and people are really comfortable with pushing the button, you can still do that. It's not that you have to make this ultimate decision between the two. These are all available to you. So you do have direct mode, which is the push on, push off, which gives you, that lets you scale into the hundreds if you wanted to do so. You have a big ballroom. So just know that you can do that. And then lastly, the long battery life. Again, if you don't know our G4 and G4 Go product line, there are 2 battery slots per device. Each battery will run 12 hours. So you could put both in for 24 hours of runtime, or just do one for 12 hours if that's enough. If there's concern, you can hot swap the batteries. The device never powers down. You never lose connectivity. And it just simple swaps and you continue going. So here's that graphic I was talking about. You have basically an access point per 8 devices for the hands-free. And that's just of the time of this recording. So you can, I know folks who will bring in just the wireless for a panel, or they'll bring in up to 40 devices and they'll put them in the room and they'll just have basically these antenna, we call them access points, that are capturing all of the microphone audio, sending them as Dante, individual Dante routes, or they could be just a mix. And that goes to the DSP. The DSP handles all the routes, handles all the return path. It gives you that greatest flexibility to really have the benefits of hands-free, even at a larger scale. We know a number of people who are doing this within the corporate space for those big, important flex space and event spaces. So in those event spaces, with the use of Televic, what does this enable? Well, you've got wireless that keeps up with the schedule. Again, all the benefits of the wireless, no wired, but you get that predictable behavior across the changing rooms because of the hands-free. So up until we released hands-free this year, 2026, before that, you were making that choice. I want the hands-free, but it's only available on the wired. And then, but I want the wireless because I need the flexibility. Now you have both. And that gives you confidence from the first word to the last because the mics are always on. Now let's escalate. let's level up. So we have everything we just talked about for event spaces. But what if there are multiple event spaces, boardrooms, meeting rooms, conference rooms, and you put air walls in between them? Well, the challenge there becomes, you got to you have to combine and divide the rooms. That's the very nature. But what it means is you have independent systems then have to act as combined systems. And that's a lot of routing. It's a lot of control. And it increases that level of risk. If you remember the slide I showed before, as you start to scale, you now have to deal with how to ensure that there are no mistakes. You need that privacy. That's what that's talking about. You can't have these, say mics 1 through 10 on one side, mics 11 through 20 on another room. 2 hours ago, it was one combined space. They're all working together. But then this afternoon, now they're two separate rooms. I can't have them sharing signals anymore. I have to make sure that that doesn't happen. Now, those solutions already exist, but it's a lot of complicated programming and effort. So when we come to our approach, you'll see in a moment, I have another diagram. We're doing access point pairing between the devices so that they're going to specific access points. But then we also have the access points anchored to what we call an AER, Plexus AER. That's our head end unit, our brain, our engine. And that means that we can couple or uncouple the different access points so they can operate as isolated or combined systems, all without complicated DSP routes. But we do use that DSP to really maximize the flexibility of what we can do. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you kind of look at a basic graphic here, you've got, let's say, A, B, C here. You've got an access point in each space, all connecting over the Televic Plexus network to the engine, the AER. And then you have Dante that goes into the Dante network and over to the DSP. So we can, through our own operating platform, couple or uncouple those access points, which means they can become isolated on their own or part of a bigger system. And then we have Dante routes able to then decide, like, okay, well, what are we doing with those individual signals? So what's great about this setup, and I've seen this at some of the larger banking institutions in New York, we've got several divisible spaces there where they're doing this. And the other advantage of that AER is you get a full 64 by 64 Brooklyn 3 card. So that way, if you had 40 mics in the room, you can get 40 signals. Now, I do want to be upfront and honest. There's the hands-free. Remember, that goes in groups of 8. Or direct mode, you can get something like this. You scale way up. So for details about that, reach out to us because there's lots of different things we can do, but we want to make sure we're making the right choice for your system. But this is really excellent in terms of how we can handle the simplicity of turning 3 individual systems into different combinations for a divide combined space. So what does this mean for you? Well, it gets you wireless that starts to behave like fixed infrastructure. That guesswork, that concern, that nerve-wracking element of like, well, are these systems isolated or are they together? We can put that kind of confidence in the technology that even though it's wireless to the access point, the way that we can infrastructure the access points to that engine, it operates in that same kind of stable way that a wired system does. And our ability to divide or combine, whether it's through our platform or you're using our API with a control system, that's all there. That means you get flexible rooms with fixed results. That's going back, I'm going to bring it back to the hands-free. The results are the same. Again, you're not worried if someone's unmuting their microphone or if they just don't want to push a button. I'm not going to do that. That's fine. The mic is always on. And then control shifts from the user to the system design. And that's kind of my point there I just made is I don't have to worry about the user interacting with this in the correct way in terms of the microphone on off. They just have to talk. And that's because we've set it up that way. That's the system design. Okay, here's my next poll. Again, check that bottom right. You should see the next poll come up. When wireless is deployed in mission critical environments, what matters most? So I've kind of, again, I threw out a bunch of things, but tell me, is it the flexibility? Is it the ease of use? Is it the routing? Or is it just system reliability? Which one of these really for you is most critical? So take a moment. Please do respond to the poll. Get that chance for a gift card. Great. Interesting results. Okay, we'll take a look at that later. Thank you for participating. All right, our last one for use cases, historic courtrooms. And again, I use historic courtrooms here, but this really is any of these buildings or spaces with historic architecture, legal protection. You cannot run cables. But I like to use courtrooms because the stakes are so high. You know, you have to capture every single word, everything that happened during the proceedings. So there is zero tolerance for anything that's missed. You can't have voice activation mode in a courtroom. You're missing too much. And the push to talk thing, well, I have had some organization or some courts that do prefer a latching on and off. I have seen it. Most, they don't trust that people will unmute. And that could be grounds for a dismissal. Or a mistrial. So the voice activated has been a huge success. In fact, it was almost purpose built for courtrooms in our wired systems. And there's been an enormous success there. But then there's these historic spaces, they can't use our wired solution. They have to use wireless. So now they can. We have that should say proceedings. They increase the complexity. And now we can deal with that in the way that we have been with wired. So again, a really simple design for this one. You know, you just place the devices out in the room, but over at the equipment rack, rather than, you know, all these wires traversing the courtroom back to the equipment rack, now we just have the access point. And again, Dante signals to a DSP. Not shown is connection to recording software. Excuse me. What's really critical about the courtrooms is that you need to have each of these positions isolated so that you can record them isolated. And our system, again, the wired, the smart audio control, that's what really allowed us to work within these spaces. That's what's also new. We talked about hands-free, but it's also this Dante DSP availability where you can have from that access point 8 Dante channels out, of which you can then assign. There's the judge, the witness, the clerk, the prosecution, defense, so on. And again, you could scale that if you needed to. So what does this enable? Again, complete and reliable records. Nothing is missed. You preserve the architecture, the beauty of the space. You don't have to run any extra cables. And then, probably most importantly, is you get the confidence. And I put in here AV-IT confidence. I'm kind of talking mostly to you out there, the integrators, consultants, the folks there, but the judge gets the confidence. The clerk gets the confidence. Really, all parties win because they know what's happening. They know that they can rely on it. They're not having to make any sacrifices by going to wireless to preserve these spaces. So what's my through line? You know, it's the same foundation. It's the same discipline. It's just different expressions of the control. Again, it's the wireless from Televic, the G4, the G4 Go. It's that discipline of the hands-free. How are we handling the audio over Dante? But it's just the use cases change. But I'm so excited. I'm just covering these 3 today, but there are so many more. Where do we win? You know, I think it's wherever that speech cannot be missed. It's simple to say that, but it's that sense of, now everybody's hybrid. You've got the people who are remote. They're not in the room. If the mics are cutting out or things are being weird, it's hard enough to stay engaged when you're remote. Just look at all of you right now. Did you make it all the way? Are you still here with me? I hope so. But if the mic audio goes bad and you start missing things, you check out right away. Spaces that change. So we talked about the reconfigurable spaces, the event spaces, the divisible spaces. You're not giving up the privacy and the control, the confidence. You just need to be able to adapt quickly. So situations where wireless must behave predictably. I mean, that's really everywhere, but it's true. That's where Televic wins, by being able to take all of the reliability that we built out with our G4 and now adding the smart audio and control with hands-free. That's the win. So I just want to remind everybody what your next steps are. Look, if this is interesting to you, if I've piqued your interest, please do reach out to us. Tell us about your space. What are your requirements? Schedule a demo, get a quote. Let's move this along. There's no reason for you to wait and have to deal with all these sacrifices you're living with today. We have the solution. Come talk to us. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask to have you follow us on our socials. That way, you don't have to wait for the next webinar. We're regularly posting about new things that we're bringing to the world. So please do follow us. And again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Hope you have a wonderful day, an evening, a morning, wherever you're watching this. Thank you so much. Bye for now.